Welcome everyone to the Pathworking series of workshops by Light. This is hosted by the Luciferian Research Society, and this is an open meeting. And we're going to just jump right into it. Thank you so much, Light, for preparing this series of presentations. And the floor is yours.
All right. Well, let's get started. I think it's important to start by giving a little backstory on myself, to give you like a bit of an introduction to why it is that I've gone into this topic and why I'm very passionate about it, why I want to share about it. First and foremost, I call myself an artist. What I mean by this is that when I go through life, I get all kinds of wild experiences. And I have a tendency to want to put that into work, to make something out of it. And for the most part of my life, that has been through visual art. On the left, you see one of the artworks I made. I went to a rave with a friend of mine. I love rave. It's wonderful. And just because of what they allowed me to experience there, because it was my first rave, I felt inclined to make an artwork that was based on a picture of them and gave a bit of a swing. To me, that's very important. It's a form of expression. I'm a bit of a very sensitive, intuitive person, and to me, these almost forms like sort of inclinations, drives, kind of. I just got them. I just kind of want them. But this has also put me into a weird position where often these kind of drives put me at odds with the things that life asks of me. There's a lot of demands in life, even though I've been born in a very comfortable position, never really had to worry about many things, whether it's groceries or a roof above my head. I am honestly in a quite comfortable position. And I've tried to spend most of my time kind of realizing what that means. Like realizing what this opportunity means. And that has turned me into a person that really wants to share this stuff. Most of the art that I've made for friends was all for free. That's kind of the, how do you say, the persona, the character as I both believe myself to be and portray myself as. The right to see me having a fun time at a rave. Middle picture, that's my, let's just say my lifetime work. I have a coat. I work on it, I paint it, and occasionally the weather will kind of wear it down. I'll put a new coat on it, I'll change it up a bit. It's like a lifelong art project. And that kind of project is one thing that I have discovered really vibes with me, which is art, put it out there, and even if it gets destroyed, even if it gets damaged, I have a sort of acceptance for it. Like I call it a collaboration with myself and nature. If I go outside, the art on it, it gets damaged by the rain, by the wear and tear. Inevitably, I have to put something new on there. Nothing that I make is really finite. It's like everything I make is finite. Nothing that I make is guaranteed to keep existing. And that's in a way a bit of a metaphor for life. We go through our lives, and eventually we meet our end, and whatever your belief is, what happens then as is life. That's a bit of my take on things. So I go through life in a very mild manner, but I do like to learn, discover. Part of that has to do with who I am as a person, how I function. I had to learn a lot because school didn't teach me much. People around me didn't teach me much. I always had to learn things by myself. And that brings you to a weird position in life, because some things are accessible, some things are less accessible. You have to some topics you really have to figure for yourself. And one of them is simply the struggles in life. Everyone has to discover these kind of by themselves because everyone lives their own unique life. The way you go through it, the struggles you have to deal with, the things you're born with, everything. But there are common themes. There are things that we all have to deal with that, in a way, actually allows us to connect. Whether it's the plain things of loving a wonderful meal, whether it's um, enjoying the fact that after very rainy weather, you get inside to a cafe and you just get to kind of warm up and just have a comfortable time. There are common themes. And for me, this was important because I struggled with connecting. And through these themes, I got to connect. Now, I used to struggle with connecting because I used to be a very neurospicy individual without any ways to deal with it. I wasn't raised in a family that had any religion in it. It was very empty, extremely empty. And with the way I was raised, it was almost like nihilistically empty. And that puts you at a very interesting position of life because you start to get faced with very, very serious, real things. Whenever you enter a depression, there's very little to hang on to. And you get faced with some of the hard stuff, even though the life is comfortable in like the sense of guaranteed food, roof above your house, roof above your head. There are still various serious things, and that has to do with the mind. No matter how comfortable your body is, you can still be alone, even when there's people around you. It's an experience you have, and it's very much to do with yourself. And thus I become today, years ago, about 7 years of research went into these topics. I've been a Luciferian for about 12 to 14 years. I started quite early because I just had questions. And even though I started at a position where nothing of religion or spirituality was taught to me, I found my way there. Something was calling me there. And what eventually led this to was I have a personal take on life, and I call this my conviction, which is that of the necro dancer, which is I dance with death. Why? I'm an adrenaline junkie, and I have a tendency to get into trouble because of who I am. I hit my head against walls, and that's how I have to learn. And that doesn't always guarantee a very safe or very comfortable life. So rather than thinking about this hardship of life, or the dangers of something like, well, I have to deal with this, I have to keep myself safe, I try to actually embrace it. This is a part of life. Everyone has to deal with it. To me, it gives a thrill. I wish to know more about it. And this search has led me to develop this course. Why serious pathwalking? I've had a lot of questions in life, and that led me to try to figure shit out for myself. I made a whole, started documenting basically what I learned in life, how I go through it, many things about it. And I've tried to turn this course into the things I've learned. In this course, I want to kind of take you through this, not as much as a personal take, but as the things I've learned from it, and I hope to learn from other people how they've gone through it. I want to start with specifically La Danse Macabre, the macabre dance, dance with death, however you want to properly translate it. Starting at this course, Mara's Maze, which you'll start to learn what I mean by this. Continuing with Paranoia in Children, which is basically talking about the blockades that you can experience in this maze. The Eye and the Other, which is essentially talking more about your place in the maze, other people in the maze, because there's more people out there. You're not alone. Believe me, there's more people out there. There's some people that believe that it's just yourself and that there's not other people, and it's all an hallucinatory or a holographic thing from your own mind. But believe me, there's other people out there. Communal emergence, which is the world that we collectively contribute to. But Free Falling Cancels Gravity is a wonderful title. I like this one. It's more talking about how to deal with these blockades to the point where you don't really notice them, and that eternal reoccurrence, which is going to be about the culmination of everything I've been talking about these 3 weeks. For people that know the term, it's about theoretical endless cycle of life. For some people, it's very real. For some people, less. Depends on your own take. And I will not be talking about whether it is or isn't, but how it would be if it is. And then we'll be talking about a few more topics coming weeks. Approaching Infinity has more to do about helping you get tools to have a more complex perspective on it. Because if the Danse Macabre is about explaining your way through life, Approaching Infinity would be about growing like your tree of life, like giving it more water, feeding it more, allowing you more ways to go through life. And then week 7 to 9, we'll be talking about topics that even if you're given all these tools, all these explanations, what are you actually going to do with it? Why are you actually going to do anything? And that's a question that anyone will probably be asking themselves a lot of times. So I will not be telling it in the sense of like, this is why you should, but these are optional ways of how to approach life. Overall, it's a series about giving people the space to move through life regardless of what you're dealing with. It's very much about hope in that sense. And I hope myself that people will stick through it and will appreciate what I have to share, because I've personally experienced a very restrictive life, even with all the comforts that come with it. Sadly, it came with many restrictions, and I'm very allergic to it. So with the lessons that I've learned, I hope other people can discover what kind of freedom you can have in life. Now, to start the course itself, Mara's maze. I'm not sure if many people are familiar with either whom or what Mara is or what their maze is. So let's start with Mara themselves. You can retrace Mara phonetically back all the way to the Sanskrit language, which goes back thousands of years. You have the verbal root of like myrrh, which is almost like a death gurgle where you're going like, but it's in its meaning, it holds death, destruction, ending, killing. It's very much the ending of something. And in the teachings, for example, within Buddhism, Mara is a very big thing. You have the Buddha, of course, which is what Buddhism is named after. And on one of the most important parts of the scripture, you have the Buddha on his last day before enlightenment being basically seduced in all possible ways by a demon called Mara to abandon this attempt to reach enlightenment. Everything thrown at him, which he, of course, managed to overcome. It's in Buddhism, they don't necessarily, the way they see gods is different than, for example, monotheism or pantheism. They do acknowledge like celestial beings and spirits, but they do have a bit of a different notion than the typical like gods from monotheism or polytheism. It's more like a force of existence of nature, of its in this case like a embodiment of the actual like suffering that you have to go through in life. But even deeper, the root goes back to Hinduism, going back to the creation story. For the people that know this, of course, of Brahma, which is the great creator, who actually created Mirtu, which is also related to the Sanskrit, like the root of myrrh, who was created with a specific purpose. Because Brahma, even though being the great creator, had a problem that at some point during his creation and creation of beings that reproduce, often with a sexual theme to it, started to run out of space. Things got too full. And thus, Mirtu was created with the purpose to bring things to an ending, so new things could be. What is interesting in the story is that they were actually quite reluctant to at first, because that meant also ending the lives of unborn babies, of people that had done nothing wrong, which is, it sounds cruel, but the fact that this fate befell anyone and anything indiscriminately made it, in a sense, a very pure thing, because there was no choice about it. It simply happened. She eventually grew into this role, And it was actually very important within the notion of samsara. When you die, you are reborn. And it was believed that specifically whenever Mara strikes you down, that you feel this kind of need of like, nah, I'm not done yet. I'm not done here yet. And that is part of the energy, the force that brings you back to go through it again. Which means that not only does Mara bring the end, it also brings the energy that gives you back your passion to go through it again, which is more a theme of rebirth, which is also very much attributed to Mara. And we'll talk about that later. For now, does anyone have any questions about specifically Mara, Mirtu, or any of these figures? See a few thumbs up. I don't see any hands. That's good. That means that we can continue. What is also interesting is that even though Sanskrit is so old, much of its phonetic root has remained into modern languages, even through things like Latin or Germanic languages. You have words like mort, murder, mord. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the Russian version of muerte. The root mer seems to persist, and it's in other words as well. Another common word there was, I believe in Sanskrit, is Jean, which has to do with birth. And a very common name you'll see is either Jan, John, Jean, John. It's an incredibly common name, which I find interesting, given that the root of those names literally means birth. And that being such a common first name, it intrigues me that there might be some connection there. So in that sense, I hold Sanskrit quite highly, and there seems to be a lot of modern languages, or many of the roots of very important notions within Sanskrit that still have survived all the way to this day. From there, I also want to move to some of the other deities and spirits that that are more modern than Mara. So we have Santa Muerte, Morgan, Marazena or Morana, which is some of the Slavic notions of Mara, Mors, Moros. They all have a similar phonetic name, similar to that root, but they also seem to have a very similar function, in that they all have a home in either death, rebirth. With the case of Morana, there's a lot of that rebirth. It's a very vital, central deity there, and shows that the notion of death, rebirth specifically, it's quite just universal for people. Like whether you like it or not, it's something you have to deal with. And the fact that the name for death itself seems to be deathless is somewhat poetic. To go even further about this, like in many Germanic folklore, in tales they spoke of the nightmare, the big black horse riding a dark wave as it enters their minds, and nightmares happen. If you look at what happened in one of the stories about Mirtu in the Hindu stories, is them taking the form of a horse. Now that notion surviving for this many thousands of years, that's also wild. There seems to be something very essential about them, and that having survived through language and story for so long is just straight up intriguing. To me, that feels like something you want to know more about, because with all of the things that change, life keeps changing. Something for this to stay this static, there must be something more about it. What I said, connects many of the deities, like death, rebirth, hardships, the hardships of life, specifically suffering. If we take the take of the Greek pantheon, Mara isn't really present. Rather, you have multiple deities that have taken separate parts of Mara. So I mentioned here, I believe, Moros for bringing ones to an end, like doom. You have Thanatos, which is actually the Death Incarnate. They have Charon ferrying them off to the underworld. But there's other parts of Mara, which is, for example, in Demeter being related to part of seasons. Winter is a very harsh, very harsh season, especially back when we didn't have heaters. So to relate winter to suffering of life was very sensible and common back then. But all of these different deities, and even other ones, because for example, Morana is often related to Hecate or Demeter. All of these different deities that have kind of almost offspring, if you want to look at it this way. If you take Mara as a root, and you see all these other deities, they seem to almost trace back if you were to create a tree out of it. I'm not here to debate whether or not they are all Mara or different phases of Mara or whatever, but it is a very vital, essential thing for the people that know the Greek pantheon. Demeter was actually a very essential figure within their pantheon because it's just so vital. Like when it has to do with grains for staying alive, for food. I believe Demeter. What's our wine lad again? I don't know if someone knows the god of wine and parties.
Dionysus.
Yes, Dionysus. Dionysus was actually an incredibly essential figure within a pantheon. It's sometimes people like to portray in pop culture based on like, well, Zeus is the top dog, and then you have like the other ones like Poseidon and Hades, but their relevancy was actually very much related to just how relevant they were to people. Demeter is, in that sense, very essential, given that rebirth, the life within many people were farmers. Like it's very essential. So we can see that this notion of Mara is, like I've been repeating the word, is essential to life. It's a very main common theme. It has to do with the dealing with hardships of life. That's how I would put it, simply put. The hardships of life. And Mara is, for me, one of the most rooted, deepest embodiments of that. But at least to the next question, what do I actually mean with that maze? Why does Mara have a maze? Now, I came over this sentence to kind of explain this. Mara's maze is a creation brought through destruction. Its present is found in absence. Such is the way a destroyer makes. Like chiseling away at a block of marble, it's the absence that ends up defining what is present. If we like to think and believe that we live in this universe, this world that has infinite potential, well, if it simply had emerged as such, well, you could start making debates about, well, how do you understand things differently from one another? Where is distinction? The only way to make infinite into something finite and understandable is to take away parts of it. Like the trouble that Brahma ran into was, well, if I just keep creating, it kind of just runs out of space. At some point, everyone is just packed in together, like skin to skin, like, guys, I can't move anymore. I know it might be a bit out there to put it like this, but it gives us a sense to understand, like, why is death, why is all these parts of suffering, why are they actually a part of existence? Because they are required to maintain the balance of that which is present and that which isn't present. In the material world, we speak of entropy. Things just eventually kind of break apart, and it gives room to new things, even like simply existence here on Earth. Things that currently exist at the surface were once long ago back down deep beneath the ground. It keeps kind of almost seeming like it recycles itself, but it gives room to something new. I mentioned in psychology we have desire. Desire is an interesting topic. It can bring many beautiful things. You can accumulate many things when you look for things, but it can also be very destructive. When it comes to a very innate, intuitive form of that, I like to give the example of the mother walking with a child and the child gets hit by a random person. The mother will get angry. and people around them will completely understand any kind of response from that moment because you don't hit a child. There's a destructive tendency, and it has a purpose to it. There is something to it that's it's not just plain destroying it for the sake of it. It's not just destroying because everything wants to be gone. There's always a purpose to it, and in that sense, I don't see Mara as something purely like negative, which, if you're a Buddhist, tends to be the case. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. In biology with reproduction, I mentioned this as destruction. I don't know how far you want to take this, but when two people come together and have a child, in essence, you give a part of yourself, and that part of yourself stops being a part of yourself. In that sense, the part of it that makes it part of yourself dies, as for the other person, and a new person is born from it. In that sense, birth literally happens after the death of two people. I don't know how far you want to go with it, but I find it a very poetic thing. Either way, Mara is present in our lives, and regardless of what your take is on Mara, whether you are fine with seeing it as an actual individual entity, force, either having intelligent choices or simply being this indiscriminate natural force, it is a presence that we can at least describe through giving it this face as Mara. I want to give a moment to ask if anyone so far has questions or wants to make has any remarks to make, maybe even wants to mention their own kind of, maybe some people of you are dealing with or connected with entities that are similar in archetype, where you can kind of recognize this presence. Because if not, we're just gonna keep on rolling. This is fascinating. Chaos has its purpose. Chaos absolutely has its purpose. And if you're something you learn, and I'm not gonna go into too deep in this. This is for the next few weeks of sessions. But if you're a mathematician, at some point you become obsessed with expanding things to approaching infinite. And if you were to do it of a structure, you would end up with the heat death of the universe. Everything will be rigid. And in that sense, you can see as chaos as that thing that allows it to not happen. So long things keep being chaotic and things are broken down, there's room for new things. I mean, how are your children or their children supposed to even do anything in a world if it's already completely set in stone? That seems like a very dreadful life for them, because then their life has already been decided. It doesn't matter if they have freedom of will. If that life has already been made that static, that rigid, and I'm not sure if you can even call it a life. Any overcrowding can sometimes be classified as being or gains an account. Yeah, I will be talking when I talk about the topic of communal emergence. I will be talking about this specifically. There's a very, very interesting effect of having a lot of people in the same place. But I'll save that for them, because it's one of the fascinating things. It gets a bit metaphysical, but it also explains a lot of things we experience in life, and I hope that can shine some light on that.
I tend to relate everything back to alchemy.
Yeah.
And I find that it's interesting that you start here, because that's where the process of alchemy begins, is when you start to break things down and separate them out. And it starts with death, basically.
Yeah.
The whole process. So
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the interesting topics to talk about, because indeed in alchemy, it's so important, like from solvate to coagula, that process. I also believe that intuitively we everyone has a notion of death, like intuitively, because if you are born out of the essential death of two parents in the process of reproduction, and that means that your birth essentially touched that presence. And I'll be talking about that more in like the next two lectures. But personally, I do believe that people intuitively know that, like through your feelings and intuition, that it's one of the things that contributes to what makes you either like inclined or disinclined, because it almost like reminds you of that feeling. Um, and in that sense, death also becomes very much a guidance in life. Uh, but I want to go deep on that in the next few lectures, because I have a lot to say about that. And there's many. I need to stay kind of on point, so we don't run like way too long in time. Because there's another part to this. I want to take a moment to talk about a specific person called Sabina Spielbeck. In the early days of development of psychoanalysis, everyone knows the name like Freud and Jung, and then there's another guy that I keep forgetting. But these guys ran because Sabine Spielrein suffered. She was a woman who went through some horrible experiences early in life, and I mean from like abuse to just, let's just say, if someone understands what suffering is, it was her. And people like Freud and Jung worked with her. And a lot of their development in their theories is thanks to her. She ended up also writing a piece herself, which is called Destruction as the Cause of Coming into Being, which is incredibly well put together title, considering what we've just been talking about in relation to Mara. And she specifically talks about that strange thing, which has to do with sexuality, which is a very big topic when you talk about, like, in that moment of Freud came up with some stuff that people very much found debatable. She mentioned something interesting, which is that there seems to be two sides to this. There is this pull towards it. There's something about it that makes you want to, but there's also a push that kind of pushes you away, like makes you don't want to. It seems that something with sexuality puts you on the edge between that life and death of wanting, not wanting. And she wrote this book about it. Specifically, if you want to look up, there's a PDF about it online, multiples maybe even. I highly recommend going through this, because even if it's a bit dated, because it's like about almost 100 years old, or maybe it is 100 years old, she has some very deep insights into this very deep notion about drive, about drive, desire. Jung at some point refers to it as specifically in relation to libido. Yeah, Thanatos, yes, absolutely. And it's specific, the quote she has here, like the in the small text, is from passionate longing, I libido, all the way up to here. She quotes Jung. I like Jung. I very much like Jung, because whereas many parts of the theory of Freud has fallen apart, Jung has stood the test of time. Anyone noticed the Myers-Briggs test for personality things? They still use that as a basis for assessing personality traits, even nowadays. Shadow work being a big topic, synchronicity. Jung goes hard. And one of the things that she mentions here, which I find important, is whoever relinquishes experiencing a risky undertaking must stifle an erotic wish, committing a form of self-murder. That's a big one. It's with the Christian based sin of lust possibly fit into this. So, one of the ways I read this is that even though they talk mainly about libido, sexuality, and that might feel inclined like it specifically has to do about sex, at that moment in time, they related that drive to just simply wanting to do stuff, any kind of desire. Meaning, and in a way you can understand that, even nowadays, if you're a guy that gets yourself a big car, a big house, you work hard, everything, all that shit you get together, in the end, is it just because you want that, or is it still because you're trying to get laid? That was the question they tried to answer back then. And whether you like it, for most people, and I would argue about 90% of people, because most people are still very much the neurotypical cis hetero, like that's still the majority of the people in the world. That model works for them. When you're neuroatypical, anything flies. And I'm not gonna be trying to talk about this too much, but purpose and the drive to want to do stuff, it seems to have a connection to specifically the sexual drive, whether that's because it uses the same transmitters, the same ways of to send the signal. I'm not a biologist expert, neither a neurologist, but I do know in my own experience that there's a connection within, I would say, the energy flow there. The most productive, most effective rituals or magic that I've performed did include that part, which to me says that if I want to make shit happen and I allow my desire and that desire, the libido, to be a part of the mediator, it seems to have an effect. And it's hard to ignore the fact that it does have an effect. But don't want to get too deep. The main thing I want to expose with this is that life, death, the sexual and the dangerous, like the thing that pulls and the thing that pushes seem to exist on a sort of boundary. And that boundary is why I'm talking about a maze. Because if we broaden the interpretation of the sexual drive to that finding purpose, the things we desire most seem to have a push and a pull to them, or a pull and a pushing us away. I can even talk about this making this presentation itself. I did that yesterday. I really wanted to make it, absolutely, because to me it's quite important. But because it's quite important, I also did not feel like making it. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this thing, whether it's analysis paralysis or somehow the things that have deep meaning seem to exist on this border. It's both something that pulls us and pushes us away. It's both that drive, that desire, but also that fearful, that pushes us away. It's kind of bothersome sometimes. But I try to think of it this way. If I'm stuck in that situation, it means I'm dealing with something that's meaningful to me. That's already information. The fact that it's meaningful to me means that I can start thinking about it. It's like, okay, it is meaningful to me. Now I have to do something with this. And the thing I've practiced for myself is finding a way to get myself into action. Our intuition seems to be clear about if something has meaning to us, yes. Though it won't always tell us what to do. That's something left to our own choices. We kind of exist on this border too. You've been given information that's meaningful. Kind of want to, you kind of don't want to. The only thing in that moment that will actually get you to do something or not do it is your own choice. That's where freedom of will comes in. We can trust on our intuition because it more or less aligns with the possible paths we can traverse, all of the things that pull us, all of the things that push us. But to actually pick a path, that's going to be your choice. Maybe sometimes it's an inclination. Sometimes something pushes you, pulls you. I don't know if anyone has a thought on this or disagrees with it, agrees with it. I would love some input on this. If it stays quiet, I'm just going to keep going. I put a little drawing under here that comes from my own grimoire, and I call it this deterministic chaos. Why do I call it this way? I start with, you have a choice here. In this moment, you kind of got to pick. What am I going to do? Am I going to do this? I'm going to do that? Maybe it has more than two paths, right? But for the simplicity's sake, we're going to say two paths. If you choose this path, given that that path leads down to goes down to a potential future where things are going to happen, there will be a moment where you're going to have to make a choice again. I call this a chance. When that moment happens, I don't know. What will be happening in the moment, I don't know. But simply making a choice sets you up for a chance. And if you build out that entire thing over your entirety of all the choices you could make, you get a tree. What I refer to as potential. In that one moment, you have a choice. And as you go through all of those choices to that potential, you have a lifeline. In that sense, you can have many different lifelines that you could have gone through, but you end up going through one. And if you put all of those potentials together, you get a tree of life. Now, I'll be talking more about this in specifically eternal reoccurrence, where we talk about going through that tree of life multiple times and what that has as an implication. That's for later. We're currently just setting up what it even means to go through a single lifetime, which I've already realizing it's kind of harsh. You're going to have to make choices. But it's nice that it's this way, because without Maris Maze, we wouldn't have the freedom of choice. Why? Any chance where you have to make a choice, that usually starts at doubt. Why? Because you're not going straight forward. You're not keep going. There's something that stops you in the moment, and now doubt arises. That doubt, regardless of whether it's like a doubt of, I don't really wanna, or, oh, I like that. I want to have that for dinner, but I also want to have that for dinner. Doesn't matter. It's doubt either way. It leads to awareness, which is essential to making a choice. Maris Maze allows us, in a way, to have that freedom of choice. Otherwise, existence itself would just be one linear line. You would be going through the same thing every time. Maybe it would be a wonderful experience. Maybe you would get bored of it. I can't tell you, because I'm living here and now. This is what I know. Understanding this, what can we do about this? Because there is still a part of suffering. There's still a hardship to it. Some people have a very rough life, whether it's because you're born with a certain disability or in a disadvantageous position in life. There's parts of it that are really unfair about it. What can you do about it? I will go into details, but I'll go through over a few topics right now, which is a lovely fucking thing I found in the Reddit comments. Thank you, Reddit. There's something good about you. If you ask yourself, if you should go work out, to go to the gym, ask yourself not, do I feel like it, but rather, have I ever regretted going? This is such wonderful fucking thinking. I love this. This is beautiful. Because in the moment, you have this feeling. Yes, intuitive feeling. When I feel like this, I don't really want to do stuff. But if you think about, well, last time I went, it felt pretty good. You have just, by choice, shifted your perspective, and a whole different feeling, a whole different perspective emerges. You always have access to this, regardless of any situation, regardless of how you feel. You always have access to, through your own will, change your perspective. And this will probably take some getting used to it, training, etc., to get used to doing this, because sometimes the feelings are very strong and you give into them. It's a part of life, but it's something you can work on. It's like developing your ability to change your own perspective, which is hopefully something I can grant people through going through this topic. These first few weeks talked about just what it is to go through a life, and then the next few weeks talked about how to widen, how to basically discover new paths. And then another big thing, learning to acknowledge and accept your fears and desires, regardless of what they are, break some of the chains you're tied down to. You cannot master a part of yourself that you don't acknowledge. Shadow work, thank you, Jung. If you are dealing with, for example, you fucking love food, but damn, do you feel bad about yourself afterwards? That's suffering right there. If you are working in the workplace and one of your colleagues hits you in the leg with an iron rod because they didn't look, that's pain, not necessarily suffering. If you then start being mumbly and grumbly about it, talking about how they're never pay attention, and you suddenly feel this, that right there, you're creating suffering. That's suffering. Pain and suffering are not the same thing. If you just acknowledge the fact you really fucking like something, even if you theoretically or very rationally shouldn't, but you acknowledge it, you will have less frustrations about it. And that's fucking essential. Even the most important part is, even if you end up not even indulging in it, simply giving you the perspective where you don't feel frustrated about it. And I will share something that is probably in this current climate not very safe to share, but I'm going to do it anyways because I think this explains in a very proper way. Personally, I am a very libido desire driven person, very much so. And that leads to a problem, which is if I go out on the street and I see random people, my mind will start making association. Sometimes they're sexual in nature. I have to constantly push those away. I'm very dedicated to my partner. That's the way I am. That's one of the struggles I have to deal with. And I accepted this for myself. It's just a part of who I am. I have to deal with this going through life. And if I were to be angry at myself, like, why am I thinking about this when I'm looking at a stranger? Why am I doing this? I'm getting mad at myself. That's just more suffering for no fucking reason. If I am accepting, like, hey, this is something that happens in my mind because this is a part of my being that just works this way. I'm just very much like this. Then I don't think about more of it, and it just leaves my head. It stops troubling me. That's less suffering. And the worst part about it, my head is indiscriminate about it. So even if it has these thoughts with people that, again, if you were to say this, you would be in some kind of moral gray or dark area or straight up wrong. That gives you doubt, like, am I a wrong person? If you think that, that's more suffering. If you accept it's a function of my head and accepting that, you will be able to go through life and not act on it. That's giving it a place. And through shadow work, you can do this very well. And it's very essential because if you do not accept it and you let that frustration build up, you will start doing stupid things. That's when it actually becomes a problem. And that leads to last thing that I'm going to be mentioning here, addressing the misinterpretation of enlightenment as positive in Buddhism. Oh, did some people mess up when importing this from the East to the West? I hear sometimes enlightenment means getting rid of suffering, getting rid of dukkha. That's how you get rid of samsara. Not necessarily in the way of you don't want to remove every factor in your life that is making you struggle. For example, if I'm at work, I really want to go home, 2 hours left, there's a cheesecake left, I really want to eat it. Longing for that cheesecake is not suffering. If I start being angry and frustrated about it, that's suffering. There are things in life that make you feel worse. That's not necessarily suffering. They're parts of that show how much you care as well. You really want to go home to hug your partner again. Missing them might seem like suffering, but it's also a signal that shows you how much you fucking care. If you get completely frustrated about it, that's suffering. Meaning, when I go through those last 2 hours, I acknowledge that I really want to. And I just keep going with work. I don't try to be stoic about it, where I push all the feelings away. I let them be. And sometimes that does get a bit mixy mushy. I don't know how to properly say that. It affects you. It absolutely affects you. But you shouldn't be getting rid of all of these discomforts. You're not going to reach enlightenment by trying to remove every single factor in your life that's discomforting. It's when you manage to let them be without really taking you off your vibe, and you incorporate them almost, and suddenly you can have these negative and positive feelings existing at the same time. That you let all of the ways you feel about stuff just flow freely. That's what you want to aim towards. Even if I definitely implore you to go research this for yourself to get a good notion of this. I think suffering is not about getting rid of all the negatives. It is not having those negatives make you suffer. And there's a very big distinction there. And that's what I kind of want to mention about this thing about Mara's Maze. It's that, yeah, life is bit of a fucking maze sometimes. Sometimes it's suffering that makes no sense. Sometimes it's kind of horrible. Sometimes it's better. But going through it in a way where you let all of this stuff happen, you let the experiences flow through, and you keep looking for these perspectives to look at things differently in life, not just to be like, well, everything is shitty, so I'm just going to keep changing my perspective to make it positive. No, sometimes things are shit. You're allowed to feel shit about it. You're allowed to be angry about it. You're allowed to do something about it. Absolutely. But to be mad about it and then start talking to everyone, oh, everything is shitty, doesn't fucking change anything. Instead, looking for ways to actually do something allows you to turn that angry feeling into action. Because action and being angry about it goes off that same energy. I hope to, in other words, there are days where the energy is forget work, I just want to stay home. If I be like a hibernating bear, honestly, yeah. Some days I wake up with this and I don't want to go to work. That feels too nice. Everything is nice. And yet I still manage to get out of it. I still manage to get out of it, even though I really want to stay in bed. Because I start thinking about, okay, what's going to happen if I do stay, like in these moments? It's not as much as scaring yourself as just giving you the realization of what it means if you made a specific choice. And it gives you a very tangible way to start navigating this maze. There is a possibility that the acceptance can open up more work for the person to understand themselves. Maybe not being prepared for what they've learned. Very heavy for a lot of people to face that thinking, of course. It is very heavy. We've developed so many ways to not want to do this. Like even your phone is a beautiful way. Just keep scrolling, just keep scrolling, just keep scrolling. There's so many ways to currently distract yourself. And that shows a part of human nature as well. We don't really want to deal with this. But that's what Samsara part of tries to like explain is like, if you don't deal with it in this lifetime, you will in the next. There is no point to want to move it away right now. There is no point to it. You will have to deal with it at some point. And whether or not you agree with the perspective that you will have to do it in the next life, even if you do not fully accept it or believe in it, acting as if it is true actually brings a lot of positive to your life. For me, this is the main thing I wanted to talk about. Any details about what it actually, the Mayor's Maze, the blockades are, will be talked about in the next one. This is more of a general perspective on what it kind of is and how it relates to just the experience of life, which is currently, I have some questions for you. What are your experiences or interpretation of this maze? Do you work with any deities that seem familiar to the archetype of Mara? Do you have any notable experiences that might help others understand the maze? Because we all have very different experiences, and sharing those might open up more understanding and thus more perspective for people. Or do you just straight up have questions so far? I see some hands. Well, Jeremy was first, so let's start with you.
Oh, that was applause.
Oh, it was applause. Oh shit! Never mind
Yeah.
then. Hey, applause for myself. Applause emoji. It's both a hand. I'm not used yet to Google Meet, so I'll get used to it. I see a hand there.
Oh yeah, Elise, go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to figure it out. Okay, so I have a question. First, can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. My question is, and I've actually never asked this before, to be honest. If you die and come back to life, like when I say die, I mean clinically dead, announced by a doctor, and then woo, you're back again because it wasn't your real time to go.
Yeah.
Does that mean that your lifeline or anything surrounding your life has become something new?
Okay. So gonna have to give the obligatory disclaimer of anything that happens after death seems to stay a mystery, though there are people that seem to claim that they have past life experiences, which seems to put some credibility to this notion of going through life. My own take on this is that when I die, literally that moment of death, even if my physical body, as this is very much the Buddhist take on this, even if my physical body starts to, decay as per entropy, my mind does keep going forward in time, but it starts anew at that same moment where I was born. Meaning, it's not just that you go through like backwards in time and then you go through time again and you go backwards in time. These lives do come after one another. And what your experience will be in that life, I don't know if it will be exactly the same life, the same story, the same world, or if it will be different. But you as a person will still stay very much close to what you are. If you want to talk about your soul, for example, it's almost like your soul is the repository that takes these experiences of life with you to the next. And that does develop. And personally, I am inclined that between these different lives, very little changes. It's that the next life I'll have, I might just straight up end up here again. But maybe there might be one or two people more or less, or
No,
I'll have a different beer to drink.
no,
Very small
no.
change.
That's not what I meant. I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't clear enough in my question. Okay, I'm gonna just put this out there. I have a documented where I died on the operating table back in 2015. They were wheeling me down to the morgue, and I sat up and started talking to them because I came back to life. Does that mean that my life started over? And I have I don't know, a new something? Or it just started off where it left off?
I feel inclined to say no. It just continued, and this I didn't want to go too deep into this, but to me personally, like my physical body and specifically my DNA, seems to me almost like a bit of a receptacle. Like it receives almost like a signal, and from your soul it sends it out, and your DNA, your body is like a physical representation of that signal, meaning that while you were dead, you were still just existing as your soul and time kept going, but because your body came back, it started receiving a signal again. So you had a temporarily dead. That's my
Well,
own
I
take.
mean, I was looking down at myself.
Oh, that's
In other words, like I
understandable.
had tape on my eyelids and I
Yeah.
saw the tubes in my nose and my mouth and IVs. I saw the little green line go flat and they started saying code blue and all that stuff. And then I went somewhere else to a
I
different plane.
I know I can definitely see something to this, because even though for the most part the center of your own being seems to be centered like kind of at your head, right? You have your eyes, you have your that gives you visual, etc. It is possible to more or less extend yourself into even things that go beyond your own body, and I talk about this actually more later as well, where I believe all of us extend into the rest of the world. When I talk about communal emergence, the whole of everything is more like a collaborative creation where each of us is in a way present in that. Meaning that the moment you die and your body stops being the center of you, to start being present more like near it as you start distancing yourself from the receptacle, to be able to see yourself when you I forgot the name of it when you move out of your body. There's a beautiful name for this.
Outer body experience.
Yeah, out of body experience or astral projection. I don't think it is necessarily a strange experience in terms of how would it even be. Like, I do genuinely believe that it's not that strange. It's the strangest part about it is actually experiencing it, because it's fucking wild. Absolutely. but the notion to move the center of your own being somewhere else, even when you pay attention, like main thing, when you pay attention to something, you can really try to like focus on something or be a more general, like even when you're alive, you know, you can kind of move the center of your attention. If that is somewhat related to the center of your being and your body is no longer holding on to that, no, I can generally see that just not being a weird thing to happen. Again, just the weirdest part, actually experiencing it. One experience that I might be able to talk about, it's a bit different, but maybe it helps understand this better. Is one morning I kind of woke up out of a dream, but it was somewhat like a little bit of sleep paralysis. I couldn't move my body, but from my experience, it felt like I was moving my limbs because I would felt like I was moving my leg up against the covers, and I could feel some kind of sensation of it. But as I tried to move it further, it kept getting more and more difficult, and it felt like it was pulling me back to where my leg actually was. So even though nothing of a material sense was moving, it definitely felt like at least I was given the experience as if it was sort of disconnect between the material form and where the energy thought it was supposed to be. And this is something I'll also get further into when I talk about Shiva and Shakti specifically, because it's a beautiful fucking example. But in that sense, I do believe the material to be a bit of a container for the energy, but also it kind of requires each other, because without the container, the energy has no real shape. That goes more into Shiva and Shakti, but this out-of-body experience, yeah, what it would more sound like is you did die, the connection got cut, and you slowly drifted away, and you got a very, very beautiful, unique perspective on life. Because to me, that sounds like a event that would change my entire perspective on life. And then you got pulled back into it. And I'm glad you're still here. That's that first and foremost. I'm glad you stay here. And then we move on to the next one, if that's okay. Sure, I'll go for it.
Hey, this is a really interesting topic, man. Thank you for giving the presentation. You know,
You're
and,
welcome.
the use of the word maze, I think, is like super profound with what you're talking about here. You know, because you think of the interpretation, or at least the idea of a maze, and coming to a point in a maze where you need to take a left or a right, make a choice, right, which could lead to chance, like you're saying. You know, one thing that kind of came to mind was, have you also kind of thought about this from the extension of the branches of choice and how that affects others in your life, right? This tree that's like connecting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have this, one of the lectures is literally called I and the Other, and it will kind of be talking about what it means to be two trees growing next to each other. Because, so quite simply put, some parts, if you want to grow your branch there, it's going to be hard for the other tree to grow their branch there. And that's one of the things we have to deal with in life, which is the moments where free choice starts to conflict with one another.
Mm-hmm.
This universe doesn't seem to like contradictions. It seems to try very hard to, paradoxes exist, but contradictions it tries to kind of avoid. We even have like a physical law called like the exclusion principle, which talks about electrons. Some things are simply excluded from existing in the same place. And in that sense, a freedom of choice definitely interferes with one another. And that's another part that comes to the maze, because this is specifically just like the experience that we have of Mara. But other people are another factor in this maze that make it even more complicated. It's a really good question, and definitely stick around for that lecture, because that will give a very much a deep dive into this. Because to me personally, the fact that me not being able to just make everything happen that I want to have happen is also a proof that I'm not here alone. For some people, this is a very big topic. People that have dealt with like depression, paranoia, etc., or people that just believe existence just comes from my own mind and nobody else's. Sorry, but I experience things in life that very much say different, and to me that's comforting. I don't like my freedom of choice being inhibited, but I also understand that that's just a part of life. And I like the comforting part to know that I'm not here alone. It's not all a big simulation. I'm not gonna wake up one day and suddenly I'm just an only mind existing in a void, thinking like, well, that was a wonderful dream. Time to go to the next one. Maybe for some people that's comforting, but there's absolutely the big part of this maze is indeed the maze that other people make for us. And I think that that might be one of the more interesting topics to a lot of people here as a Luciferian, but also with the modern times that we're in, where control and power and influence on others seems to be a very big thing. So that will be addressed in that lecture. Should be next week, because Thursday we're going to be talking about paranoia and our daughters, which is more to do with the obstacles we experience in the maze. And then after that we have I and the other, which talks about these two trees growing together. And then after that, communal emergence, which talks more about the actual space that these trees grow into. I think these four together give a very nice fundament to kind of understand like the basis of pathworking. The two after that of like falling free cancels gravity has more to do with like how to address these obstacles. And the last one, eternal reoccurrence, is just put everything from these lectures together in perspective of what it would be like if we do take this notion of eternal reoccurrence as a given, but in a specific perspective that we can actually do something with. I hope that answers your question. Awesome. Any other questions? Or maybe something that somebody wants to contribute to it. I have a few questions on the presentation itself. I'll give it a few seconds, otherwise we're just going to move to the last slide. And a 3, and a 2, and a 1, and a go. Okay, awesome. Last slide, which is going to be talking quickly about what I'm going to be talking about Thursday, paranoia and children. So again, who is paranoia? Who are the children? Who are these? What are we talking about? Who are these? Who are the people? And why are they blocking our way? Why would they do this to us? Recognizing blocked paths is very important, because these paths exist. They are already there. We're just their own worst enemy in this case. And we'll start to talk about recognizing this. I'll also start talking about the 3 parallel senses of mind, body, and soul. Now, there's different perspectives on this, but I have a personal take where I do believe that there is a threefoldness to at least the experience of life. And I have a very long written piece about this that I try to back it with a lot of sources, but we're not going to dive too deep into that yet. It's just going to be talking about how it leads to the sensation of paradox, paralysis, and paranoia. And how these relate to the notions of descending, integrating, and descending along the path, which has more to do with, even if you have all of these different branches, even on this one singular branch, you can ascend, integrate, or descend, meaning go up, integrate, staying at the same place, or descend. These branches, in a way, can go way up and way down. Don't try to visualize, because it gets very weird, but I'll be explaining it then, and it will more or less explain how even going down one path after having made a choice, there are still ways that we can influence our experience, even without being presented with a specific chance that leads to a new branch. Which has to do with recognizing these blocked paths, because sometimes you do have to move a bit up or even down to find these other branches. I do believe, yeah, that's the last one. We just went through it, just like that. Lost for myself. I hope people enjoyed this first lecture, this first introduction to the topic. At least it was supposed to give some insight into trying to explain like why life has this weird maziness to it. Mainly has to do with the fact that even if we are presented with a moment of understanding that something is meaningfully important, that we are not necessarily already knowing where to go from there. And in a way, it's nice because it gives us the freedom of choice. What to do with this information, I will be explaining in these further lectures, because to explain everything in one go is way too much. I've spent like 7 years specifically on deep diving on this, and it's in connection with just the whole 14 years of me going through this, starting with Luciferianism, even before I knew it was a thing. Turns out it just lined up well with what I was already practicing. And I hope that by the end of this, and I'll specifically move back to this slide because again I find it a very interesting title. These first 3 weeks are going to be talking about just specifically this lifetime, this one line. Week 4 to 6 about trying to find as many branches in this one lifetime and just growing your tree to the highest. But the last weeks will be specifically about even if you have all these tools, even if you have all of this knowledge about this, what to actually do with it, the whole why. Because even if you have tools, now I've learned this specifically living in like a very comfortable life. I wasted most of it because I had no why. I could have done a lot of awesome things. I just didn't care. There was no why. And it's very essential to us. And on that first lesson, I'll be talking about incremental growth, regardless of what your aim is, in terms of like, maybe you want to start a little bar because you love chilling with people and you love making drinks, or maybe you want to do something else. Incremental growth works for all of us. Then the Thursday after is going to be more personal take on this. Tuesday is going to be talking about ascension, nirvana, self-excellence, apotheosis, and more. These are the many big topics that many people have written about, and these could be things that you're going for. Indra's web. I love Indra's web. It's such a fascinating thing. We'll be talking more about that, but it's wonderful. The soul gem is going to be more about the actual soul. I'm talking about it in a geometric sense, but also in other ways. And an infinite reflection, hopefully, by the time that you've gone through all of these different lectures, if you manage to get something from all of them and you feel like you've taken away from it what I was trying to explain, if you manage to get through all of them and then go through the last one, I hope that you have now found the way or the methods, the tools to work with to experience as full of a tree of life as you can go through, which would be my hope, granting you freedom or freedom of choice or whatever in that sense would be awesome. I think like that's very much in line with my belief as a Luciferian, as a light bringer, that this is something I should be working towards to share. Are these on a set time like today? I want to do it preferably at this time of the day. Yeah. So that's it. That's it. For today I'm spent.
Thank you so much, Light, for preparing and presenting this talk. I found it fascinating and thought-provoking and really enjoyed it thoroughly, and definitely looking forward to next lecture, which is in just 2 days from now.
Yeah.
Same time.
I see a very big question in the chat for anything to read up on to prep for the next one. So I don't know if it's specifically something to read up on. I think this is something that I can give you something to work with, which is if you were to give yourself a little like post-it note or something to remind you specifically of the part where meaning comes with the both push and pull, that can give you a little tool to help yourself out in moments of like paralysis analysis or something. Just having a physical tool can actually help you there very much. But something to think about as preparation for the next one is, I mentioned this thing about paranoia and her children recognizing what path, if you could prepare maybe some past moments for yourself, like these were moments that I regret, like I didn't pick this path right here. And you can think for yourself, what were the reasons to it? You can give yourself a little preparation on like, what were my experience? What are my notions? What are my thoughts about this? So when I give these talks, you have something for yourself prepared that can both give you extra insight into the talk, but also allows you to contribute in a more critical sense. Because again, these are my interpretations, these are my thoughts. And if you come prepared, you might be able to even give a specific critical perspective on it that can very much contribute to the talk. Because I'm just one perspective. Another one being like, I talk about like the parallel senses of mind, body, and soul. Some people might think of these as just one thing. So if you prepare something for yourself as like, I really experience them as this one unified thing, we can dive into the contrast between these two notions of either having it separated or for yourself as a unified thing. And we can, without saying which one is correct, we can at least, for people that do hold on to it being a unified thing, learn and understand why some people do have them divided and vice versa. So, do I have something to read up on? For this one, no. For other lectures, yeah. But this one is more of a personal thing. All right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending your time here. I'll be honest, beforehand, I was quite anxious, as I usually am, because I'm both excited and nervous and scared, which to me tells me I care about this. And I hope that I managed to convey that as well. So very much thank you for your time. I hope to see every one of you again with the next lecture and the ones after. I believe it's being recorded, so if you miss one, you recommend to at least watch it back, because every single one will be building on the next one. So it's nice if you don't miss out on one. That's it.
Great. Well, thanks again, Light. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we can still hang out a little bit afterwards if people feel like hanging out for a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.